Hi everyone. My name is Vladimir. I'm a partner at E3 Capital Partners. It's a climate VC fund with focus on Africa. Today we are going to talk about the differences between equity financing and bootstrapping, what's best. And we have a very interesting crowd here. We have VC, we have incubators, we have actually founders. So I will let the panel introduce themselves.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm Leland Piri. I'm the operating partner at Enigma Ventures. We are a gender lens fund that focuses on investing in women entrepreneurs in Southern and Eastern Africa. We invest at seed stage and primarily equity. Yeah.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Zintlem Ngube. I'm the investment associate at 22 Sloan. At 22 Sloan, we are pretty much an ecosystem enabler with four pillars that we do, which is providing market access, funding access, putting together, designing and implementing value-add programs for the benefit of entrepreneurs, and lastly, doing all of that while putting in place good governance as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Brett Matheson, and at BetEvolve we are people and strategy partners to entrepreneurs who are looking to take their business to the next level.
Hi everyone, Kevin Distiller, the MD of Odyssey Talent Management. We're an assess tech company, and we focus on trying to democratize the assessment landscape, which is a whole ethical and sort of societal impact that we're trying to get to, but for another day. Lovely being here.
Thank you, guys. I think we can start this panel with first question to everyone. Given that you guys are entrepreneurs yourself and you work with many founders, in your view, what is the main difference or correlation in a mindset between those founders who bootstrap versus those who go at fundraising very early and want to grow at any cost?
I'll say two. The ones that bootstrap are quite focused on their unit economics quite early in the process. They want to ensure that the business can become self-sustaining as quickly as possible. And they're ensuring that the fundamentals are right, both in the cost structure, but also in the revenue model. Whereas the ones that are not thinking about bootstrapping through the gate and they're thinking about just fundraise, whilst they might have a big plan and a big vision, are not entirely sure how the unit economics will pan out, and they're not entirely sure how the revenue model will pan out. Yeah.
If there's anything that I can add to what Ilemba said is, yeah, I agree. It's a question of metrics that each one is looking at. So to what Ilemba said, the bootstrappers are looking at their revenue and their profitability because nothing else is coming in. So if you can get that revenue to go up alongside your profitability, then you can be as self-sustaining quickly as possible. Whereas with the VC-backed ones, and maybe just to make a difference between the guys that are, how can I say, obsessed with fundraising for the sake of fundraising, the VC-backed ones at least are looking at different metrics that at times aren't necessarily theirs. They speak to what the VC is looking for from depending on which stage they're raising, it's a question of the product market fit and things that they're still striving to do, and they have a bit of runway to figure that out. But it's very important to say that both of them are going after the same thing. At the end of the day, they both want to have self-sustaining, highly successful businesses. So their mindset is different. It's just a question of which metrics are they looking for at that point in time. But the earlier they are, the more similar they are.
So I think there's a full spectrum that you see from a bootstrapping perspective right way through to your serial investment and serial raises that are going through. And the guys that are chasing, and please excuse the gender bias there, but the people that are chasing the growth at all cost type mentality are closer to your celebrity CEO type status people, and it's very image oriented. It's who do you know, how are you showing up, where are you showing up, what parties are you showing up, and there's a lot of that goes on, and what ends up happening is there's a lot of media, there's a lot of PR, a lot of things around that. Whereas with your bootstrapped people, it's a very different mindset. In fact, the most successful bootstrap people that I know are the people you've never heard of, and they don't want to be known. But they are multi-billionaires in many different fields, but you've never heard of them. So there is a big mindset shift from that. But I think from a startup perspective, the big realization that people need to make is it's a 15 to 20 year commitment to get to a serious payout.
Okay, I'll try to add something to what's been said. I think for me, bootstrapping is a little bit more stuck in the present because you have to kind of get things working. You're in the engine room making things happen. It's a bit harder to get above it, even though you may have a vision of where you want to get to, you sometimes can't get there. I think there's a danger that when you funded, it's kind of a similar concept. You know, Rassi Erasmus always said, let the main thing be the main thing. You got to win before you can change lives. It's the same thing. I think you can get caught up in the status, the aura, the dream of what you're trying to achieve, and you can almost be too far ahead in the road and not necessarily get stuck in the detail. That's kind of what I would add.
Well, thank you. And maybe it's a bit controversial, but also a question for all of you guys. Do you think that it's also driven by the personality of the founder, of the founders, that there are people who just are naturally good at convincing other people, and those who are really uncomfortable with that, and then at the end of the day, that's a formula of this. So people just delay the fundraising till the last moment and focus on bootstrapping. It's just because they are uncomfortable.
I think yes and no. Yes, some personalities definitely are more prone to chase that, but I think the environment that you are in also prescribes that a little bit. There's major differences from the big four economies across the continent and the rest of Africa in how they perceive this, just because there isn't so much VC money flowing in the other economies outside of Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and Egypt, right? And so you will find that the entrepreneurs outside of those big markets tend to at least have a plan for both. Like, if we fundraise, we'll expand at this rate. If we don't, we need to make sure that our economics work well enough that this business can keep running. And so sometimes it is both a personality thing, and other times it's an environment thing. Additionally, we do find that women tend to want to bootstrap more than men. And so that could also be something that is around just like the gender dynamics and the expectation around how badly women are funded on this continent. I mean, $5+ billion last year, and only 4% of that went to women. It's really dismal.
I think, for me, it depends. It goes down to why you actually started the business as well. If you are one of those that see stars at night and think that you're part of those stars, obviously you're going to do what it requires for you to shine. So in some instances, it may want you to put yourself out there. And I think with the era of social media, there are a lot of these entrepreneurial influencers out there that are just putting themselves out, telling us what they're doing. Whether they are actually doing what they're saying they're doing is a completely different matter altogether. But it's because they like the idea of being a popular, successful entrepreneur. Whereas in some instances, they want those successful businesses. And in some instances, it requires you to play the game. Unfortunately, wherever we are, the game is the game. You have to be out there and network and get to know people for the sake of capital raising or putting together some corporate partners in your pocket. But you see the nuances, I think, when we're out there. There are people that are just game players for the sake of playing the game. But then there are people that have to play the game for the success of their businesses.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add to it. I'll just be explaining it in a different language.
Yeah, all I would say is I don't think it's a straightforward question. I think it probably boils down to people that are worth funding versus those that aren't, and people that I think there's a nature-nurture element to it. And what I mean by that is sometimes it's personality, and we all have in our mindset it's a generalization of that charismatic entrepreneur. But the truth is, I think entrepreneurs come in all different shapes and sizes, all different types of personalities. Some might be very inspirational, others might not be, but they're still really good at starting a business and building it. And I think that whole VC question, I think it is definitely something that is romanticized out there. Everybody wants a unicorn. And I think specifically in the tech space, it's kind of something that everybody sees as what you need to have to be able to get that business going. But there are other industries where it's not as well kind of sought after, and people kind of build businesses much slower. So I think it kind of depends on the context.
Oh, thanks for that. But I guess we still see that there are some discrepancies in this market. As was noted that less than 3% of startups are female-led companies. And like in Kenya, for example, we see that about 80% of funding still goes to expats and is not raised by, say, local founders. My next question to you guys is, we all know that any successful startup needs to do both, fundraise and bootstrap at some point. What do you think is this perfect moment when the company needs to go for funding instead of bootstrapping, and if they don't, they basically just delay their growth?
Somebody else can kick that one off.
I'm happy to go there. So I think when we're looking at fundraising specifically, you've got to look at the various ways you can get funds. And the best ways to get funds is always going to be through your clients, unless you can get money for free through government subsidies and that type of thing. That's going to be the best way to get money. But your traditional best way is through clients. So if you can do it through your client base, that is the best way. To go down to the VC perspective and get to that, is once you've got a clear path through a growth strategy that you can see is going to work, and by adding more money to that, you're going to get much faster returns, then bringing in a VC makes a hell of a lot of sense. But it doesn't have to be a VC, it can be any sort of investor, just bringing outside funds from that perspective. But also when we're looking at funding, it's a factor of value creation for who? And most people, when we talk about value creation, we think, okay, there's a customer base that we're creating value for. But there's also an investment base that we're creating value for. There's also employees we're creating value for. There's also suppliers we're creating value for. There's also the community we're creating value for. And you can capture value from any one of those particular points. And in startups, specifically early stage startups, you are capturing value from your employees because chances are you can't pay full market related salaries. You're asking them to take a subsidy to be able to join this and pay it down later on. Or it's a motivational play. In a supplier perspective, we've had a client that they put very favorable terms on their payment structure to be able to pay that supplier. So they put 6 months delays into paying that supplier off. So they got all the materials they needed, they got everything they needed. They sold that off, and then 6 months later they paid it back. So funding doesn't have to come from a venture capital. It doesn't have to come from an investor. You've got lots of different ways to be able to look at that. And being able to get it from your client, that is the most effective and best way of getting there.
Yeah, if I can also just add to what Brett said, there's also the element of the complexity of the product or the service that you're putting out there. There are certain things that are just IP heavy, require a lot of R&D that is beyond the pockets of the founders. However, my personal rule of thumb is wait until, as what Brett said, there is actual value that you're putting out there. Even if it's a rudimentary product that doesn't have the bells and whistles, but as long as there is proof that whatever you're putting out there does emit value to an end customer of sorts, then maybe the next step would be to build it out in the best way that you possibly can. Then yes, let there be room. But I wouldn't recommend anyone to raise funds from the get-go when there's absolutely no value that has been defined from your end as a founder.
I'll add to that. I agree with both points. And in addition to that, I think it depends on the stage where you're at in your business and what you actually need the money for. Because every type of money costs money, right? Every type of money costs you something, including grants. Those grants can take a hell of a time to like just report on. You'll be reporting for 6 years post the time you use the money for the grant. And so it's really important from an entrepreneur's perspective to first of all know your options as to the types of funding that you can look out for, what's best suited for the particular purpose that you want. For example, if you need it for a big asset that could unlock some good value, equity is not necessarily the right thing. That could just be, you know, like an asset loan that you can get out of, depending on how quickly you create that value, right? And so the wrong financing at the wrong time has killed many an entrepreneur because they just have not been able to create the right value to, you know, give back to their funder. And so with these stages saying that there's something of value that you have to create, it's also important to think about the cost that any of this financing will bring to the entrepreneur before you make that leap.
All I'll add is I'll say I think it's a strategic decision. There's a time where you may need it. We made the call not to go for funding at a certain point in our journey. We were happy to rather do it on our own. It takes much longer because we can only afford X number of developers. With funding, you could afford, you know, X time 100. But we decided we wanted full control, and we wanted to be able to do it on our terms. So we chose not to go there. But someone else may have made the different decision, got the funding, got the developers, got to market quicker, but we didn't want the payoff.
Oh, thanks. It's very good points. One thing I would add from our experience is that I think my advice to every entrepreneur would be, regardless of the strategy, bootstrapping or fundraising, at some point of your life, you will have to fundraise. It's really, really important to understand the difference between different financing types, different investors, and understand what's the best fit for you at this particular point of time. Because the biggest mistakes we see is that founders just don't understand what they want. And then they pick wrong investors, wrong financing, and end up either being over-diluted or with with many other issues. Perfect. I think my last question would be for you guys, if you were to give an advice, okay, given that where we are at the moment with macroeconomics and all the global crisis, VC funding is not available anymore, valuations are subdued, people are laying over staff, Silicon Valley Bank is down. If you were to give an advice to a person who want to start business tomorrow, what would it be?
And that's the show.
I'll go first. I think we've already said it. I think you've got to have the value creation. You need to know what it is you're actually trying to solve for, and you need to know that it's actually going to make a difference somewhere. It's going to hit a pain point for someone, so that you can build a business around a product that actually has a purpose. I think a lot of times people have great ideas that sound fantastic, but if nobody wants to buy it, it doesn't help. So that's the first thing, is you've got to find the right product that's going to make a difference, hit a pain point, and you've got to develop a business model that can be profitable. If you've got those two things, I think then you can decide on the best way to get it to market.
Yeah, so there's a fantastic book out there called The Mom Test. It's a brilliant book to answer that specific question. But the real key is customer validation. Yep. And you need to be able to do that early and often. The sooner you can start doing that, the better. And if you can validate these customer assumptions while being paid by somebody else, that's a very good way of doing it. Only once you're very confident in what you're doing, be able to go out on your own is a good way of doing that. But the key in the start is always building your sales capability. Like, that is the number one thing that's going to get you off the ground. It's the number one thing that's going to grow your business and get you to a certain point. So sales capability through customer validation and building out that story, that narrative, is the only way you're to get that business off the ground.
I would say, further to what Kevin and Brett said, be cold about your business and be cold about what it is that you're doing. If it's not working, it's not working. Don't force matters. If something doesn't necessarily provide customer validation or solve a particular problem, or the problem's not big enough, kill it. I think there are a lot of people that think their ideas matter when, in all honesty, they don't. And we just need to get to that place of being more cold about evaluating our business. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it may break your heart and you may not sleep at night. But rather that now than 2-3 years down the line, after spending all your savings and your retirements and lying to VCs and other financiers that this works when it doesn't. So kill it now, kill it quickly if it doesn't work, and then find a bigger problem or a better solution for the problem.
I'll add that a good way to be able to kill it now and kill it quickly is to stop calling your business ideas babies, because nobody wants to be told their baby is ugly, okay? So rather call them experiments. That way the experiment didn't work, on to the next one. So you're not that highly invested, just to help you out with being able to kill things quickly. Nobody wants to throw away their baby. But I would say don't waste a good crisis, right? In every crisis, there's lots of opportunity. And I think that we're going to just have some phenomenal businesses coming out of this time of, I guess, less spending, because maybe the entrepreneurs will find the type of ideas and value creation opportunities that actually just make money from the get-go. So don't waste a good crisis. Just keep validating as quickly, as fast as possible what works, and keep creating value, and you'll be fine. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks for this insights. And I guess we can wrap up and open up for questions.
Yep. So we get the mic. We've got one. That was quick. 1, 2, 3 questions. Anyone else? Anyone else? 4. So we're locking in those 4 questions, and that's it for this round. Cool. Can we start there?
Hi everyone, my name is Brendan. I'm from Graphic Tech. I just wanted to understand if there is a clear problem in the market and a clear value proposition to that problem, can a business really fail, or do founders run out of energy and they just need to find ways of evolving their businesses, either their business model or finding new ways of financing it, or whatever the problem may be that they're facing? Thank you.
Yes.
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 So there's a beautiful theory out there called the jobs to be done theory, that looks at a problem through multiple lenses. And although there might seem like there's a functional solution to it, and the functional solution makes a lot of sense to it, there's emotional or social context that you might not necessarily understand, and therefore they might not make that purchase. So I've seen it a lot in process automation, specifically in South Africa, where what you're bringing to the fore is something that's going to drive efficiencies that's inevitably going to lead to layoffs. The person that's needing to make that decision is the same person that is inviting that person that they need to lay off that week, and their family's coming around for a bride. There's all those types of things that, although functionally it makes perfect sense, it's going to make a lot more money for the business. Emotionally, that's a decision that person's not going to make unless they're forced to make that decision. So that's just one example of a functional problem that makes a lot of sense, but it's going to fail because of an emotional issue around it.
There's also just the inability for the founders or the team to just sell. The value proposition is there, the gap is there in the market, and you're just not going to your customers and saying bye. You have all of these meetings, and the meeting goes very well, but there isn't that closing of the deal, so it's very possible to still fail.
Cool.
I just want to say there's even that inability of the founders to actually build out that solution. You know what the solution is, you see the value proposition, but there's just incapability internally in the team to actually build out that solution. So it can work out in so many ways.
Just another example, I think more closely to yours, is I think what you're doing, a lot of it's business intelligence, data analytics orientated, which it's called seasoned and senior people have been making decisions not necessarily off of data, and now you're putting data front and center. What you're asking them to do is put themselves in a very vulnerable position in front of their team too. So there's another very good emotional reason for somebody not buying a solution that makes complete sense, and in one context will make a world of difference and potentially a success or failure difference to a business. In another context, it's not even a channel or a conversation they're willing to have.
Okay, all I'm going to add is I'm going to say in the Civitas network, we talk a lot about the sales channel. And I think that's something a lot of businesses spend a lot of time working on, because you can have a great product, but you have to work out how to sell it. And I think a lot of us know our products are good intuitively, but if you can't work out how to get the customer to see the value, it could be a great solution, no one's going to buy it. And the other thing I'd say is I think sometimes brilliant businesses fail just because they're badly run. That's the thing.
Yeah. Cool. I think that Yeah, that rose earlier, so. Well, that rose further back. Is that mic working? Cool. There we go.
Yeah. So my question hits a little bit on the it's a personal question, meaning that it leans more towards the entrepreneur themselves, you know, the person. I'm speaking for a lot of entrepreneurs here. There's always that element of imposter syndrome, right? And I don't know what your view is on this school of thought that startups from the US and Nigeria specifically are a little bit more aggressive in terms of how they present or they sell value versus South African startups. I don't know what your view is on that. Why I'm referring that question to you is I want to understand, following on Brandon's question, if you've identified a real problem and you have a real value, and where do you fail? Does the personality maybe not come across, and are you able maybe not to articulate, you know, your value the way that you need to before you can it? Like the gentleman say, just now you're canning gold, and you just probably were not in the best position to maybe sell it. Maybe a stronger sales force would be able to help you articulate it, but you find yourself being a little bit more humble. So is there a difference between South African startups, I speak so for myself, versus those from the US, and does an aggressive sort of approach have anything to do with it? Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to first say that what I'm realizing is I think we all come across as if we think we're experts, and I'm definitely not. I'm exactly like everyone else. I'm also an entrepreneur, just finding my way. Like, you know, I always say when we had our parents, we thought they were perfect. Then we became parents and we realized they were just winging it. It's exactly the same, okay? I will say this. There is research that I've seen that tells us that South Africans are typically less conflict. We more conflict averse than the US market would be. And I think if you talk to people that break into other markets, they'll say, I mean, I spoke to a guy with a business in Australia, and he said, everyone speaks English, but they don't say the same thing. You don't understand what they mean. I know a guy in Canada that said the same thing. He said they talk to you, but none of it makes sense. So I don't think it's just Nigeria, US versus here. I think it's probably any market you look at. They're all going to have the nuances. So there's some wonderful things about the way we do business here and the way we do business on the continent that makes us very unique and very special. And if we can harness that and take it internationally and kind of recognize how it's different, it can probably be a value add. But I do think, and this is just a thought, I do think we're less aggressive as people in our mindset than you'd find in like the US.
So I spent a couple of years in the US, so I've seen quite a lot of that firsthand, and that market is totally, totally different to South Africa. The unemployment's like 3%. So their safety net is like massive. Our safety net in this country is you could be on the streets if this fails. Whereas in a US perspective, okay, this business failed, I'm gonna go on to the next one, I'm gonna go on to the next one, I'm gonna go on to the next one, or I can always get a corporate job, or I've got a blanket, I've got a safety net beforehand, and I'm not gonna put my own money into this because I know I can get money from my neighbor down the street. So it's a very, very different mindset, and everything from being raised as a child right the way through is about building confidence in yourself. There's a hell of a lot of confidence that happens inside of that space, and there's a lot more community building around like supporting success in that space. So success breeds success, and it keeps going. So that's a very big factor that happens there. But capital is all over the show. Like you can literally go down to your neighbor, and they'll give you $20,000 just willy-nilly. It's a great idea. Let's go do this and let's see what happens.
For your Instagram for cats.
Exactly. You know, there's money to be made all over the show. There's a niche. Yeah. When you've got 300 million consumers, there's a niche. Yeah. You got to find it. So you can make money in that way, and in a lot of different ways in that country. Whereas here, 30% unemployment and the tax base plus everything else, the consumer power, it's so much harder. The other side, on the sales perspective, sales is difficult. And selling in this environment is difficult. You can have the best technical solution, but if you can't get it across in a way that somebody buys into it, it's going to be difficult to get that across. One of the best people out there that I've seen is Rich Mulholland. If you're on LinkedIn, go check his stuff out. He's absolutely brilliant. And just little hacks, little tactics to be able to frame certain things in a way that's going to make you remember it or make you buy it. So look into that story seller. There's a whole bunch of different things around sales.
Yeah, I don't have much to say, but I think what I can say, though, is humility does not mean you're not confident. And you'll find that though the American style of selling may not work here in South Africa because of our culture and who we are. So you as an entrepreneur with your personality and who you are, I think I just want to affirm that you are good enough to run your business. You're good enough to actually make your businesses successful. Don't think that because this culture is a humble culture, that it does not mean that they are not confident and know what they're talking about. I understand that there are instances, yes, of imposter syndrome, but you have to remind yourself of what steps took you for you to be in this position, to run the business that you're running, and to have the value proposition that you have somehow managed to carve out in a possibly saturated market. So backing yourself while being humble is not a conflict of personality. It's just a culture of the place. And you find that the rest of a good chunk of sub-Saharan Africa is like that. I mean, if you speak to a Nigerian person versus a Ghanaian person, neighbors, but very different personalities. But they do get the job done. And even abroad, when you go to China, they have a different personality in terms of how they're selling. And you'll find that it aligns more or less with how South Africans sell in terms of culture. So, yeah.
Cool. Can we have the mic over there? And
Thank you. I think a question to the investors, obviously say when you found it's not working, kill it and kill it fast. What I'd like to understand from your history and your portfolio companies, how many times have you seen a successful pivot, and how involved were you or weren't you in that, which might also include telling the founder gently to get out of the way? I'd love to understand in terms of your engagement with your founders, how active you have been and where it has or hasn't worked.
So when we invest, we actually look at it more like we're a strategic partner, so we are quite involved. We run strategic planning sessions with our entrepreneurs every quarter. We're having monthly management meetings with them as well. In terms of seeing successful pivots, probably in our portfolio of 14 in one fund and 11 in the other fund that we manage, we've seen probably about 5. And it's not always easy because the entrepreneur is in the business, doing the business. And even when you can see that this needs to shift, trying to get them to shift can be quite a challenge. And so, yeah, I mean, it depends on the personality of the entrepreneur. Some are more strong-headed and they will want to hit their head into the wall 5 times before they shift, whilst others are a lot more pliable and are happy to try a new thing the minute they hit the wall the first time, yeah. So, yeah, 5 out of maybe 25.
So if I can just, the success that we've seen in that is the founders self-identifying into that. And it's a facilitation skill that is very difficult to master. And as soon as you come from a power dynamic situation, there's a defensiveness that's going to come into that conversation. Founders are very, very, very well attuned to what their investor sentiment is. And 3 bad decisions and they've lost their investors. They're very, very well aware of it. So if an investor's coming in to have that conversation, you're automatically coming up against, or I'm losing my investors, and back against the wall mentality and all that. But if they can self-identify, and when I say self-identify, usually it's a 2-hour conversation. This isn't a phone call thing. This is a sit down, unpack, help them see what's going on in their business and see where they are the problem in that business, and then see them self-identify into solutions to that.
Cool. Last one. Do we have where's the mic? Can we have it come down here? Okay, yeah, this is much, much, much quicker.
All right, thank you very much.
Please do stand up. Tell us your name.
Hi, my name is Tebogo Petlele. I'm from a company called Seponono Africa. My question, I think you have answered it indirectly, but I just wanted to find out. I found myself at some stage in a very conflicting position where I had to transition from what worked and it was not working. So would you still say kill it? Is it not about maybe advising them to be innovative? Because I've realized that there's many ways to kill a cat. So sometimes just saying kill it It's like you telling me not to be resilient. Maybe it's just a matter of you to say, we don't think that you are ready, then I have to go back and relook it into my strategy and just become innovative. It's not maybe a question, but maybe we can chat.
Cool.
I'll answer
I
that
thought
because
out loud.
that was quite direct.
You were the killer.
I was quite threatening, wasn't I? I think when I say kill it, Debucho, I don't necessarily mean kill or throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's reconsider where you're going. And obviously, I'm entitled to an opinion. You're entitled to an opinion as a founder. And when we say kill it, we're not saying this doesn't work, go away. We actually give our reasons why we don't think this may be the right route to go. More than happy for you to counter that and for you to back yourself. And it's a question then of, and it will always be a dialogue. It's not a once-off thing. But if you can provide that substantive evidence and in terms of how you want to work, then I think we're more than happy to stand behind you if you provide a good route to how you're going to resolve what we believe is something that is not working. So we're not saying killing or killing you or anything. It's just reconsider this. Just kill it sounds so nice, but we're not saying kill everything, reconsider.
There's two ways to kill a business. One, cash running out. Second, motivation running out. So as long as you've got the motivation and you're prepared not to have the cash coming out of it, you can do whatever you want for as long as you want, provided you've got the motivation. So if an investor says you need to kill this idea, understand why they're saying that. Where is the problem within this that they won't put money in? Because they won't be putting money in for a couple of reasons, but the biggest thing is they think they can get a better return elsewhere. So if they think they're going to get a better return elsewhere, what can you do within your business model, within your business, to be able to get a similar type return that would attract that person? And figure out those different ways, because like you said, there's many ways to kill a cat, but understanding where you've gone wrong, that is the space. And you might not have gone wrong. It might not have been the right investor or the right person. You might have gone to a tech funder with a manufacturing business. It's like you're just never going to get anywhere with it. And maybe you've got there because it's a favor, and they want to be able to support black entrepreneurship, female entrepreneurship, and they're having this conversation off the back of it. You know, there's so many different motivations to have that, but unless you ask the clarifying question as to why this didn't work, and it's a hard question to ask, it's a vulnerable question to ask. You're kind of saying, like, oh, I made a mistake, but I want to know what that mistake was, and I want the honest truth as to what mistake I made. That's a tough position to put yourself in, but you are putting yourself in that position.
Thank you very much, everybody. Can we give our panel a big round of applause as they prepare to leave stage?